Welcome to Withdraw Consent. I'm Jack. So there's this PSYOP that goes around, and it's basically people like Tim Pool or someone in that category will do this argument. Well, they'll take people who they claim to be white supremacists or whatever. They would put me in that category as an ethno-nationalist. They would put me in that category, and they would say the reason why this person doesn't like the tiny hat people is because he's just envious, just jealous of their success. And let me break this down. Why this is? I've talked about some of this stuff, but I'm going to put some new ideas in here too. So basically, what you've got is if you go back to the medieval times and you look at how successful Jews were, they would accumulate wealth within a couple of generations, and then every now and then, the Europeans would just steal all their wealth, kick them out of the country, do different things. But within a couple generations, they had reacquired that wealth. And so, okay, well, let me stop there. If you want to say that it's because of inherent higher IQ, or you want to go to the Nobel Prize thing, I'm going to put first link in the description. It's a video by Leather Apron Club, and he debunks all of that, like scientifically, statistically debunks all that. They had faked the IQ studies in kibbutzes where they had above average education that was not based on a generic sampling of the population. You can go look at that there. But in the medieval example, the question is, how were they acquiring that money, right? And so basically this PSYOP says, Jack, you're on an even playing field with the Jews and you're getting outcompeted. The problem with that, obviously, is that it's got a logical flaw in there, is that it's not an even playing field. Not that they have some type of inherent disadvantage, but they have an advantage because they're willing to make money doing things that I wouldn't do, or that people like me wouldn't to do, right? So if you look back to the Middle Ages, they would acquire a lot of their money by usury, which Christianity up to a certain point completely said was a sin. All of Islam said it was a sin. So the majority of the religious people on the planet thought it was a terrible sin. And then you had these people living among you who you despise and look down on because of their sinful ways, acquiring money through sinful means. And you could look at other things like Epstein type stuff. During the Sound of Freedom, there were Jews doing one of those rings down there. And what my point here is that good people who are ethno-nationalists aren't envious of Jewish success, because Jewish success is frequently based on acquiring the money through nefarious means. Now, if you take somebody like Mark Zuckerberg, who's Jewish, and he's created this thing, and whether you like that thing or not doesn't matter, he's been incredibly successful. That's not the person Tim Pool is talking about. Tim Pool is not saying, Jack, you're envious of Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg did terrific financially. He did terrific by creating a product, this and that. That's not who we're talking about. We're also not talking about Elon Musk, a white guy, Elon Musk, or Jeff Bezos, or just any of these people. We're talking about just in general, okay? So that part's pretty easy to see, that there's a PSYOP going in on there, and it's not based on any type of truth. But I want to get into something else that I haven't discussed. And this is the part where the statement by Tim Pool would be true if he phrased it right. And so if he said, Jack, you're envious of Jews because of their incredible cohesion as a unit, as an organizational community unit, and their ability to stay together and keep their culture, then I would say, yes, absolutely. I have praised the Jews before for keeping their culture together during the diaspora. Whether they lost their ethnic, but they kept their culture together. They lost their language. They switched to another language. They went to Yiddish. They switched back to Hebrew, but they still maintain some semblance of their culture. Whereas you look at my people, white people, or European people, and you see us willingly letting our culture get decimated, and the inability to keep and maintain it demographically and culturally. And so if Tim Pool was making that argument, then yes, I'm self-admitted envious of them, because they succeed at doing the thing that this channel is promoting people do, is to gain a cohesion. And so you look at it too, and Now, one of the things I don't envy is that one of the qualities of Jewish people is that yes, they can maintain their group culture, but they also actively work to destroy the group culture of whoever the host nation is. Because they're a minority in every country except for one. So in places where they are the minority, not in Israel, I'm talking about, they work to destroy the culture of the host nation and to bring in minorities, whatever the country is, just bring in minorities. It doesn't matter who the majority people is, in order to weaken the power of the majority so that the majority can't stop them from acquiring money in nefarious ways or political influence or whatever. And so, yeah, obviously I don't like this part of them. And come to think of it, they're so good at group cohesion that they're willing to do things that I'm not even advocating that you or I do. Not necessarily because of their morality of doing them, because the sacrifice is too high. So, for example, let's look at an example. Let's look at Jared Kushner. Okay, so Jared Kushner is this Jewish guy, like whatever, obviously he's a white European man, obviously. But he's this Jewish guy, right? And if he marries a Jewish woman, then he has Jewish children down to, infinity and beyond if they continue that pattern. But basically what they do is, as a group, they sacrifice Jared Kushner to go get married to Ivanka Trump. And I know there is a brother Nathaniel argument that Ivanka Trump is Jewish. And if that's the case, then that ruins my point on this one. But there's many similar cases to this. But in this case, since the Jewishness is passed on in the maternal line, and Ivanka Trump is not admittedly Jewish prior to her conversion, which doesn't count as far as moving that ethnic line down, even though we know it's not ethnic. But this is what they say. So those children are second-class Jews. They don't count as full Jews because their mother wasn't born Jewish, right? But they're willing to sacrifice Jared Kushner and him not have real Jewish kids in order to get that power just during a 4-year period. Now it's unclear right now how much power he has during the second Trump term. But if you just say it was during the first 4 years, what a great sacrifice, because I'm not willing to send any of my sons to go do that. And if you look historically, there's very frequently been a European king with a Jewish wife or some type of situation like that, where there's a Jew being put into a marriage situation. You can even look in the Bible. You could look at Esther, what I'm saying is I'm not willing to sacrifice my sons, but they are willing to sacrifice. They sacrificed Jared Kushner just for a little progress for Israel. And that's wild, because there's no way that I'm going to say, raise my kids, send them to Hebrew school, we'll say, right? Find some, fake Jewish genealogy somewhere, emigrate to Israel, have my kids fight in the IDF, emigrate back to the US, and then have my kids infiltrate, AIPAC or something to get the scoop on them 40 years from now. Like, no way am I doing any of that. Do you know what I'm saying? Way too great of a sacrifice because you're trying to make these kids into something, and then I'm not willing to sacrifice any of them in that manner. Anyways, the first part I think is pretty clear that Tim Pool and people who do this argument are being completely disingenuous by doing it, and they're just misrepresenting the facts to you. But the second part about actually being envious of this one element is an interesting idea, and after you think through it, and I'd be interested in hearing what you have to say in the comments to see if you think I'm off base or you think it's legitimate. Anyways, that's what I got for you guys. Hope you have a great weekend. Hope to see you next week.